fuck? Okay, auto night detection on.
Alright. So, when do you consider the golden age of hip hop?
For me, I would really like to say the early 80s.
Early 80s?
Yeah.
Wow.
For me, from my perspective, yeah. And the reason why I say that is because there was, it was a time in my life, so I was born in 1972, and I was just like running around like a toddler when it first started exploding onto the scene, and before I had any understanding of it. But as I became, in the 80s, I started coming into my teenage years, it really shifted and shaped and like who I was, and it helped me, give me an outlet to identify with, when I heard, people talk about, what was going on the scene, with things that I seen outside my window, things that I could relate to, people that came from like my experience. And there was a lot of, hype back then. It was around the time, it was Grandmaster Flash, and it was, and Rapper's Delight was out, and it was a real good feel to it. And it was, it was really community based. It really felt good. We had what you call jams that got big and started to take off. And jams are what they were when people in the community that were immersed in this culture, they would get out and they would set up like big radios or whatever they had, that could emit the sound, in the park, and we plug it in to the light post. And they called them jams, and everybody knew where it was going to be at. And there was one, being from New York on the Lower East Side, there was one in the Hill on one section of the Lower East Side, and there was one on, on my side. And it was always, we would go and represent. If you was from one side, you go to the other side, meet their girls, and it was like a big mixer around hip hop, and you would hear this good music, and it just felt good. But I think also like one of the groups that made hip hop, like put hip hop on the map, came out, and it was Run DMC. That just had the real bouncy sound, the edgy sound.
What was it, like 87?
Yeah, when they started coming out, it was like, more mid 80s. It came out in, I want to say, Run DMC came out around 85.
85.
Right around there, around 86. Is, I think, when I remember listening to them for the first time. And my dates could be a little off. Of course, we heard things like before they came out, because before people were signed, we heard stuff in the underground. They would perform in these so-called jams. And they already had a name for themselves, and we were already familiar with them before the rest of the culture did get to hear them.
So that's kind of interesting, because I definitely know like hip hop, as far as what can make someone gravitate toward it, be many reasons. But from what you just said, from the one question about the 90s, I heard a lot of stuff. You were saying like, they were saying something that you could relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Not only was it relatable, but it was it was forming a community, and as well as forming a community, it gave you something to do within the community. So like, right. So early 80s, which of these three do you think had the biggest impact on you in regard to like making you gravitate towards it?
Definitely like you said, the sense of community, the sense of belonging, having something that was in the community that was tangible, that I could gravitate toward, actually feel, and it wasn't something that was distant. It was something that was,
right down the block.
Right, and it was a movement that everybody was, it was already in full steam, but it was opening up to, prior to that, I think It was very subculture. It was very underground. There was little pockets in the Bronx and in Brooklyn where it was Zulu Nation and African Bambaataa and all these other different groups that, you know, they were community-based groups that were led from like organizations that were like Black Pride organizations and promoting that within their community.
Peace, love, and unity.
Yeah, right. And so they started this stuff, and it was kind of distance. You know, I didn't go to the Bronx. You know, I've only heard stories, but then you would see people from the Bronx come down to my side of town, and they kind of looked different. And, you know, they had these big, gigantic boombox radios that had like 16D batteries, and they would carry them and lug them on their shoulders like this, and they have to switch off because they were so heavy, and everybody had to take a turn carrying them. They had little shopping carts to put them in and lug them around, you know. And they were like, we want to express us. They wanted to be heard, and they were saying something, and they were saying it through the music, so, you know, and that's how, you know, kind of spread to our neck of the woods.
So what were the stories that you heard around like the myth of like African Bambaataa and like KRS-One as far as like in relation to like this Black empowerment movement or this unification, a community movement rather?
So I never got into the I never got in early on. I never got into what was behind the movement, but you could definitely sense it all around. And there's that movement, you know, like the Pride movement, you know, the Black Pride community that was out there was definitely different pockets everywhere, and they all had different messages. But this was one that was from my generation, you know. But it was more. I mean, like they had the same message, but it was like told differently, you know, and conveyed and expressed differently. So, like, I didn't really take all of that. You know, I didn't really get involved as much as I didn't get involved as much as I probably would have if I knew what was going on. I just was at the time was just a youngster, just being a follower and like going with the flow of what I seen and what I heard and according to what I could relate to. So that's what attracted me to it. You know, the time that I was coming up, I didn't know that, you know, being that I didn't feel, I sensed it from what I heard, but I didn't feel like I was a minority, like I was being less than, you know, in society has deemed me as less than, and that I needed an outlet to express that I don't like the way I feel being you know, feeling like made to feel like I was less than. So I didn't feel that so much at the time. I didn't experience. When I experienced like forms of racism or inequality and exclusion, I didn't even realize that that's what was going on. That it was because of the color of my skin. I was that naive to that portion of it. You know, I think I was that sheltered and protected from it. So I didn't have that fire and that passion to be like, hey, you know, I really want to connect and to this group because they're really doing something and making a statement against this and for freedom and equality for our people, you know.
I'll be right back. We'll grab some spinach.
All right, man.
Mini and spinach like potato chips.
All right, spinach is good.
You still going?
Good for you. Yeah. So I guess I'll keep going. Yeah, like I only saw people get hosed down on TV, so it didn't directly affect me. I only seen like the police unleash dogs on black people on TV, you know. So then it wasn't something I identified with, you know, where I had that kind of passion, that I had that, where I needed that voice. to express my frustration and my anger. But it was also a tool to just like celebrate. Like, okay, man, regardless, you guys did all these things to us. Granted, this is a reality. It wasn't all my reality, but it was a reality, and I'm aware of it. But you know what? We have this tool to deal with it. And as bad as times got, and as the level of poverty that we were living in, we still had a good freaking time. We still got together. After a day of being, mistreated and abused and not having enough food and having to do, different things and be degraded by, by living conditions, we still got out and it was like, we put on our best clothes every Friday and we went to these jams. And like people that didn't have much, people shared clothes and make sure we matched. It was a big part of clothes, and it was uplifting. It was like, to see see us out there and be smiling and laughing and dancing and so another reason why I zero in on that is the golden age, because there was a lot more to it. It was the dancing. There was the dancing. There was stuff. There was this thing that we called. So I actually forget what we called it, but it might be known as the dozens, where people gather around and they just tell jokes and just get on each other and pick each other apart, but in a fun way, and able to laugh and hug and whatever. I might talk about your hair. You might talk about my big feet. And everybody will laugh and they'll go away and it'll be like, and in the dancing, like, we pulled out cardboard boxes, cut them open, laid them out, and we would dance in the street. And the reason why we did that was to make it, slip and slide and glide on, because a lot of breakdancing happened on the floor. So you start up here and you be doing all this, we call it top rocking or up rocking, where you do this certain kind of dance, and then it was like, I forget what they call it. My memory's gone. Anyway, electric boogie, where you do pop locking and you do different stuff. And then there was break dancing, where you kind of get down, but you kind of incorporate all of it to like really be fly or dope, or these are just some of the words I'm gonna throw out there. Fresh, that's what we was back then in the '80s. It was fresh. To be fresh, you incorporated all of that, and
so the golden era for you is more highlighted as far as in relation to hip hop by how many different cultural aspects there were, and like how uplifting and like kind of like fun hip hop really was in the '80s. Mm-hmm. Is that what I'm getting?
Exactly. That because hip hop is more than just a form of verbal expression. It's so much more than that. That's where people get it twisted. They think it only has to do with a few artists that can rhyme, or when they had Grammys, or when the first rapper to get a that's irrelevant. I mean, the real deal is before even hip hop artists were selling records, it was so much more important than anybody could imagine. Before it was even the rest of the world glommed onto it. It was like something that was for us, by us, and it had strong significance. And as you can see, to see where it came from and to see where it's at now is self-evident that that's how powerful it was, and that you couldn't hold it back. I mean, I'm gonna tell you this. There was so much opposition to the hip hop culture. I mean, there was talk of outlawing. I mean, we were banned from the parks. The police would come and they would break us up. They would threaten to lock us up. They made laws about it. They said if we gathered, and congregated, that it was an illegal assembly and they would lock us up. You know, and it wasn't all positive. Sometimes, you know, fights would break out.
And this is the 80s?
This is the 80s. Fights would break out, but that's how people settle things, you know. It was a time where we didn't run and get guns and shoot each other up and have to be carrying caskets the next day. We went out there and there'd be little rumbles, and it'd be like this side of town, this 8th Street against 10th Street, and they'd all fight, you know, for whatever reason. And the next day, they'd be walking around, and the next week, you know, they'll be talking about it, and they'll be back to partying again, like it never happened. You know,
there's a great book out there called Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun, and it's about the evolution of violence within New York City, predominantly black communities, and how it evolved, and how, like, you know, we talk about how, like, gun control, like, there's, like, you can have gun control, like, you know, in Texas or wherever, you can fight about this all day, but at the end of the day, like, within these inner cities, like, guns are everywhere, but why is it this, like, where did this evolution come from? But I think it's interesting that, along with this evolution of violence, do you think with the evolution of violence came an evolution of hip hop as well? Do you think hip hop started to reflect that in the 90s?
the violence definitely. All right. So the way I perceived it when it hit my community was that I'm gonna tell you the real deal from what I seen, and the violence came when the drug market changed in the communities. So our communities, and I guess in an effort, you know, and it's documented, where there was, there was some conspiracy, you know, to keep, you know, to dominate and keep certain groups down, you know, and oppressed. They flooded certain communities with a cheap version of cocaine called crack, and that happened also around in the mid '80s. So what they tried to do was they tried to associate that with hip hop and say, see, this is bad, hip hop is bad, we gotta ban this, blah, blah, blah. But what it really was something totally different, that, you know, the people in the community, you know, they had no access to coke. You know, we didn't have jets to fly, you know, cocaine from Bolivia into the hood, you know. But when it got there, we used it. It enhanced it did something to change the culture, and there was the big aspect of money making, and that became part of the culture, because maybe a part that I glossed over was fashion. You know, we came from a place where we were the have-nots. We had nothing. We had shoes with holes in them. You know, we wore our brothers' hand-me-downs, things like that. So, like, we would get our best dressed, like what I was saying before. We would get it together and get our best stuff on, like, and we would express ourselves through fashion, and it was about being, you know, unique and creative. A lot of us were artists, and so we would do things like draw graffiti art and airbrush art, which is another component of hip hop that took off in the '80s, and all this happened all at once. So that's why, like I said, it's the golden era. So, like, I would have, like, a denim jacket, and I would have it, like, airbrushed my name and all this glistening stuff on the back, you know, so I could represent who I was, and maybe, you know, and a little picture of a character doing something like holding a spray can, you know, and look at me, you know, I'm expressing myself. I'm giving myself identity and permission to be proud of who I am. You know, they saying that I'm not all that, and I'm an outlaw, and I'm no good, and I'm a misfit, but you know what? Actually, I'm all this. I'm creative. I can dance. I can sing. I got talents. You know, I'm well liked and respected in my own community. You know, and I feel and I belong here, even though society says at that time, mainstream society said that we were misfits and that we shouldn't exist. You know, cease cease and desist what you're doing because you're contributing to all society's negative issues. No, so that's a big part of it. So the violence came, to answer your question, as a direct result to the disruption of the drugs. The drug culture, people got territorial. They needed to carve out space to hustle their product and make money. Money was important to people that had no money. And so then people would die over this money. Blood money. That's where blood money comes from.
But do you think that the drugs sparking the violence, do you think that was reflected within hip hop?
Oh yeah, because people talked about it all. I mean, you had artists that really painted the real vivid picture.
And when these artists start to surface more, like when did you start to see a?
Oh, so that was late '80s. I mean, like you would hear stuff like a little bit was still underground, but from artists like Nas and Tupac. There was a lot of, you might not have heard of them. There was folks like Apache from the Bronx, and there's, there's so many of them, so many names that I could go down the list that emerged in this era, that would talk about what they seen. Diamond D and Fat Joe. And Fat Joe was out on the scene doing this stuff on 125th Street in Harlem, before he even made a record deal. He was standing out there with a little amplifier and a mic and setting up battles on the streets. Before he was known in the community, but before he had and he would talk about it, being a crack kingpin and, and I'm the man in my hood and this and all these other things. So it was, and how they admired the people. Like if you hear like certain songs from Nas, like looking out the project window, he talks about what he's seen, and like that's what I seen outside of my window, so that's what made it relatable. Like I saw people pull up and park their, $30,000, $40,000 Benz next to a car that didn't have no tires on it, that was practically stripped and had patch paint work and was in disarray, and half the whole street looked like that. But then you had these two cars and one or two cars pull up, and they stood out, and it got our attention. But these were the folks that were doing. They were the hustlers, and they were bringing the dope in. So it looked like a way out. It was glamorous, and it was another way to express ourselves. Now we could get money to express ourselves, and we don't have to live, scraping scraps to eat. So it was a way out. So then communities were formed around the drug culture, and it took away from the hip hop culture. So it's not one and the same, but it kind of merged somehow because it was the same generation, because it all happened at the same time.
Do you think the reporting of hip hop, as in like great example like looking out the project window with Nas, do you think the reporting of hip hop came at the same time as also the glamorization of drugs within hip hop, or do you think it was kind of like a? Yeah, I guess that was my question. Yeah.
I'll repeat the question.
Do you think that like the reporting of hip hop came at the same time as the glamorization of drugs within hip hop?
It depends on what you was paying attention to. I remember, so the glamorization of hip hop really took off when.
A lot of drugs, like drug cult, anything stemming from drug cult, yeah.
So it wasn't highlighted. We were censored. So if you heard songs like Project, they never got airplay. Mm-hmm. They never got airplay. When videos first came out, and Fab Five Freddy and whoever else had their, I forget what it was, Yo MTV Raps, and when they first started coming out with hip hop videos and showing them, it was very few that they would even show. It was like Salt and Pepper and Run DMC. And you had to be real mainstream, and that's where they talked about selling out. So they didn't get a chance to really voice their stuff. So as it got popular and everything, On the other end, drug culture was being maybe not glamorized in the media, but it was being villainized in the media. You know, baby mother left their kids to starve to death because she was out smoking crack. And, you know, drug dealers shot out the block again, 15 kids got hit by stray bullets. And, you know, all of this, you know, negativity that was around it. And it was real, and it was very real. And it wasn't a nice picture that was painted, and it wasn't the whole picture. And the whole picture never got told by either side, by the hip-hop culture or by the media. But if you was in that era, then you know you had no choice but to see, you know, that picture was just, and there was some glamour and there was some, you know, there was some fear, because we lived in a culture that, you know, you could get stabbed, shot, or killed at any given moment for $5 for your shoes, even, you know, for your shades, you know, because it was a time where there was such heavy poverty. And then there was such money, you know, the money from the drugs. And so, like, if I'm starving and I'm seeing you sitting over there with a steak, you know, my kids, you know, you're liable to get jacked for your steak. And this is an everyday occurrence. And that started to get highlighted a little bit and reported in hip hop. The people, they were glamorizing. See, yeah, you come down my block with your sneakers and your gloss and your jewels. We gonna get you. Come out in the wrong neighborhood, to my town, we gonna get you. And it was like a warning, but you know, they was just telling what they saw. It was the reality.
So, you mentioned like Run and KRS-One in Africa Bambaataa as artists in the '80s who helped you kind of cope with some of the racism inherent in the United States. Which artists would you say helped you cope with some of these new problems in the 90s? Like if there was this feeling of like, wow, this is crazy, like this is a life like this is a lifestyle that's like right outside, and then on top of it, like they're trying to censor it on top, like not just being within it, but then understanding that it's being censored, that like...
So I was extremely conflicted because I was drawn to both lives. Because I wanted to be, you know, I was seeking approval and wanting to fit in and so bad, so much. But, you know, the way that things have felt was like most of us ended up falling out of school, dropping out of school, and we weren't getting good jobs or anything. So it's like we ended up kind of shifting into that other life just to support the lifestyle that you know, in hip hop, like you wanted to get out to the party. You wanted to get to the club. You wanted to dance. Now, I was a DJ at the time in the late 90s. You know, so I did all of that stuff. I did the breaking, I did the graffiti, I had the graffiti crew. I would say Big Daddy Kane was one of the artists that I could point to that highlighted a lot. But I would definitely have to say that Public Enemy that would highlight these real topics and issues, and they would make me conflicted. Because, you know, and then in the 90s, like Brand Nubian came out, and they talked about, you know, like how they set us up, but we falling for the bait, you know? And they started to open our eyes to see what the problems were and how the problems got here, and that how now we're a big part of the problem, and now we need to be part of the solution now that we have some awareness, you know. And they really raised a lot of awareness towards these issues, you know, like you need to educate yourself. Don't drop out of school. You know, take pride and in your appearance. You know, comb that nappy fro. You know, put your best on when you go out. Stop going out looking like however, and take care of your kids. And, you know, don't use these drugs. The killing us. Look at what happened to such and such and such and such. Let's do it differently. And it made it hard because they started, let's stop selling crack to our pregnant women and things like that. And it made it hard because at that time now I was already dependent on that lifestyle for my own survival and dependency and so, to support myself. And I was like, oh, I'm listening to this music that's got me conflict. It doesn't coincide with what I'm doing. So now I feel convicted and I need to stop what I'm doing, or I need to stop listening to this music because it's kind of making me feel conscious about what I'm doing.
Was would you say there are any other factors outside of hip hop that made you feel conscious or conflicted with what you were doing?
Oh yeah.
From as far as like a normal medium, as in like books or movies or any other type of music. As far as the arts, was there any other type of art or like even like school education? But I guess that would go back into books.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, once you heard, and then once you read like some of our leaders and all that they struggled to achieve, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and you start reading those type of books, I'd always go back for entertainment to books like Donald Goines and street hood novels, as I would call them. They were entertaining. They were something I could relate to, but they weren't contributing. They were taking away. They were degrading us. We talked about, there was this pimp culture that I never could gravitate to, where it was supposed to be okay to utilize women and degrade them. And I think it still goes on today in rap culture. And this was also something that made me conflicted. But yeah, books were a way to raise my awareness and say, no, this is not okay. We should, these are our sisters and our daughters. And why are we proud that we get to treat them like this? That's not cool. Does to make ourselves feel better, it's self-serving. And it's real, it's not what it started. It's not community oriented. This is tearing us down. We need to flip the script and we need to bring our women and our sisters, counterparts up, and we need to empower them as well. Because the same way that we're feeling oppressed by this society, we're oppressing that society. How does that make it right? So that awareness came up and caused confliction. You would hear the B word and you would hear stuff like money over bitches and bitches ain't shit, and you would hear the B word constantly, and which was highly degraded. And